Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of About Abroad, where it's my job to introduce you to people who have built amazing lives for themselves in various foreign corners of the globe. We're talking with expats and thought leaders about moving abroad, remote work, visas, and all the fun and practical knowledge that you need to know to follow in their footsteps. If you've ever dreamed of making a life for yourself overseas, maybe working remotely or embracing long-term travel, retiring or studying abroad, or even just taking a peek inside life beyond your borders, you've landed in the right place. My guest today is my new friend Eleonore, who joins me from Paris, but as you will come to find out, she has lived all over the world and currently is the lead immigration lawyer at Lexidy Law, where she specializes in helping people get some of the most popular visas in one of the most popular countries in the world, there in France. So today we dive deep on two different visas. One is the visitor's visa and the other is the freelancer visa, both of which would be of interest to anybody that's working remotely or has their own business or is doing some sort of freelancing and working online. I think there are a lot of opportunities in France that people are just somewhat unaware of. And fortunately, Eleonore is here to help us navigate this. So we'll get into all the details in this episode. She's a wealth of knowledge and has the experience of having lived in a variety of countries around the world and knows the challenges that come with being a foreigner and trying to settle down abroad. So a lot of fun. I learned a ton in this one, and I hope you all will as well. Please help me in welcoming Eleonore to About Abroad. Okay, so you're in Paris now, but I see your last name here. And then you mentioned previously in some communication that we had that you used to live in Rome or you grew up in Italy or something. So I'm a little confused. Where are you from, Eleonore? Where are you right now?
This is a very difficult question for me. When people ask me where I come from, I'm stuck and I don't know where to start. I will try to simplify it. Well, my mother is a Belgian. My dad, he's Portuguese, but he grew up in Angola, in Africa. And he worked in Italy, in Rome. So this is where I grew up. But actually, I was born in Senegal because my parents used to work there. So I lived 5 years in Dakar, the capital of Senegal. Then we moved to Rome. Then we moved to Belgium, where my mom is from. And then back to Rome as well, where I finished high school. And I started university in Florence. It's a beautiful city. I really recommend you to go there since you're in Italy right now. And then after Florence, I went to Paris. And this is where I end up. I finished my studies there, law school, and I started working as a lawyer here. And so it was kind of natural for me to choose to work in the immigration field because I've always been moving around. I can relate to the issues and to the questions that our clients can have. And yeah, that's for my personal story.
Yeah, I think that's like something that I'm looking for actually when I'm working with someone in immigration. Like I kind of want to know that they've had to go through what I've had to go through, and it's not necessarily like a box that has to be checked for me, but that says something that it's like an actual core part of your personal story, because that's. I mean, especially going through like childhood and adolescence and then growing up in all these different countries, like you were just naturally baked into a lot of challenges from the immigration standpoint, I imagine. So very interesting. And was it a fun childhood? Like, did you enjoy that, or was it tough?
Yes, no. Well, today I will say yes, definitely, because I'm very happy to have had this experience. I learned a lot of language. I'm very at ease with different type of personalities, different type of culture, and I could not live without this now. But when I was a child or a teenager, it was not always happy. I was very angry with my parents. I did not understand why they wanted to move all the time. But of course, now with all the time that passed, I'm so glad that I had this experience and that I was able to live all these things, because then you become an adult and we have all a tendency to settle. I know that you are an exception here, and well, most of the people I'm dealing with on my day-to-day work are as well. But no, it gives you an openness of mind that you cannot find easily if you don't travel, especially as a kid. But of course, you need to adapt in new school. I remember when I was 16, this was very tough because I moved from Belgium, where I had all my friends, my boyfriend. You know, when you're 16, it's a difficult age. And I had to move back to Rome, which was a country I already, well, a city I already knew. I was living there before. But it was in the middle of the school year in January. And I remember this feeling when I had to enter the classroom and everyone was looking at me. And, you know, at this age, it's not always easy. But then, of course, I managed to make friends that are still my friends today. So at the end, well, if I sum up everything, it's a very good experience and I really recommend it. Don't be afraid to move with your kids. Of course, there are some ways to do it. Of course, you need to be prepared to a lot of eventualities, but I think it's always a good thing that you can bring with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I had a previous guest on the show who, it was funny, we were talking about this. He's traveled extensively with his kids and they've gone through different phases. His two daughters, they've gone through a couple different phases after 6 or 7 years of pretty much full-time traveling, living in different countries and experiencing different cultures. They've had times where they've loved it, and thought it was really exciting and cool and fun. They've had times where it was really challenging because they had, boyfriends or friends that they were leaving behind. They had made those social connections. And so he's kind of said the same, like he couldn't really say like, yes, it's been positive or no, it's been negative. It's kind of been a mix of all those things. But in retrospect, both he said he and his kids would not have done it any differently. And like they got to grow up with, learning a bunch of different languages and getting all these different life experiences that I think are going to pay dividends over the course of the rest of their life. So, obviously you and I live and breathe this field. We're going to be obvious advocates for this sort of thing, but I do love hearing those stories, like from somebody that's actually done it. I think it's inspiring to hear that, it can be done and it can be a net positive.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then, of course, yeah, well, it depends on each personality. But for me personally, it was really something positive. Well, we had some issues, for instance, with my older sister that had more difficulties to adapt, but then you find solutions. What we did when we moved at this time, it was before, I was around 10, 12. We moved from Rome to Belgium. It was the other way around. And for her as well, it was complicated. She was a teen and she could not adapt. So what my parents did is that she went back to school, to her former school in Rome, and she came back for the weekends, and this worked, and she was happy. And I mean, you just have to adapt. It was not so strange for us because my dad, he always worked in Rome, so every weekend he used to take the plane on the Friday evening, go to see my mom wherever she was, and coming back on Sunday evening or Monday morning. Sometimes he had to wake up like at 4 a.m. I think it was a struggle, it's a challenge, but it's definitely worth it, and it worked. I believe that when I was born and my mom was in Senegal at that time, she was like, I would say 30, 35 years old, alone. And at that time, I'm talking about 30 years ago, we did not have all these technologies. We did not have Zoom. We did not have internet. So things were a little bit more challenging, I guess. But today is a completely different thing. And yeah, um, I think it's a good experience. And we have the capacity of traveling and meeting new cultures. And I think it's always, you can always take something positive out of these experiences.
Yeah, I was thinking when you were talking about your dad's weekly schedule there, I was like, man, I bet he really wishes we had remote work back then.
Yeah, I
Because
think so.
that would have changed things. He might not have gotten as many airline miles or points, but that would have made his life a little easier. You ended up in France though, which if I'm following the timeline of your zigzagging around the world as a child, you didn't really have any connections to France until that point, did you?
No, absolutely not. When I was in high school, I found this program, this university's program that was basically a double degree between Italy and France. And I remember because I went to my parents like, hey, I want to do this. And my mom was like, no, you're going to study in Belgium like we all did. And I was like, no, no, I really want to try this thing. And then I ended up in France and I have family all over Europe, but not in France. So yeah, it was kind of a new thing, but on the other hand, French is my mother tongue. You can hear it when I speak English. So it's not such a big cultural shock. It's not so different at the end because, well, today I'm in Paris, but I go very often to see my family in Brussels, and it's just 1 hour and a half with the train. And as well, most of my friends here with whom I come from during this double degree, Italian and French law, are Italians, and they had no difficulties at all to adapt here. It's really, yeah, it's an international city, and as well, there are a lot of possibilities. You can find something for you here.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's a great thing about a city like Paris is that you won't lack for options in just about anything. So I'd say you ended up in a great place, and you've been there for a while now. And in fact, you specialize in helping other people follow in your footsteps and make France their home. It was easier for you than perhaps a lot of people listening, I guess, because you already have the European passport and you speak the language, but I imagine you've encountered lots of people who don't have those attributes, and you've been able to make them a happy home there in France. So I think that's really exciting. I'm looking forward to diving into it. But before we do that, am I correct in saying everything in my assumptions there?
Yes, 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 absolutely. Well, I'm sometimes it's surprising for the people I work with my colleagues, or just people I meet, because I don't have a French nationality, but you cannot see it, you cannot hear it, and it's true that as a European, it's very easy to settle in any other European country. You don't have to ask for a residency permit or authorization or these kind of things. But of course, if you come from the US like you, or a country that is not within the European Union, now the United Kingdom as well is part of these countries, it's different. You have to make the move right. And what I can say is that France is a very administrative country. I mean, things are not complicated. You can get your visa, you can get your residency permit, but you need to make the first moves correctly because of all the paperwork, all the administration. I don't want to scare anyone, of course, but it's just something you need to be aware of. It's maybe not the case in other countries where things can be a little bit smoother, easier. So yes, I have a lot of work, absolutely, and the good thing is that I almost always manage to get visas for our clients. We never had a rejection for now. So if you make things right, there is no reason that you won't get your dream come true.
Yeah, that bureaucratic friction is a good thing for people in your line of work. I'm glad it exists because no, I think it's good. We need experts like yourself to help people that don't do this every day. Figure out the process. And I often think, like, I don't know if you think this is the case in France, but my experience has been in, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 different countries when I've needed to get a visa. I've been able to do it with or without some assistance, but I've never regretted investing in getting the assistance, because when I've done it myself, I always end up regretting it. I get halfway through the process and I think, why didn't I just hire somebody to do this, who does this every single day and knows how to do it much better than I could? Like my time has value as well. So
Absolutely.
anyway, that's been my experience.
Yeah, yeah, I can relate to this also because, well, the process change all the time. Sometimes it's not easy just to get the correct information and know where you have to submit your application or which number you're supposed to call. And yeah, for us, it's really our job. So we do it all the time. And I cannot imagine like people coming out of nowhere and trying to do it themselves. I'm very impressed because a lot manage to do them to do all this process by themselves, but it's complicated, and you
Well,
need to
we'll
speak French.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And some stereotypes are true for a reason, and but not always completely true. Do you like France is a country that I would, if I were planning to get a visa there, I wouldn't necessarily expect to be able to do a lot of this without speaking French. Like if I was just going to try on my own,
Well,
um, do you
for
think
the
that's true or no?
yes and no, in the sense that for the visa application in itself, you don't have to speak French. So I have every time, even yesterday, I had a client calling me like, "Oh, I don't speak French. Is it a problem to get my long stay visa for France?" And I said, "Absolutely not. This is not a condition at all." But it's true that when you arrive in France, things might get a little bit trickier if you don't speak French, because like very honestly, French people are bad at languages. So, and this is also why we are attractive at Lexidy, because we are English speaking lawyers. It's a very simple thing, but it's not so easy to find a French attorney specialized in immigration law that speaks English. Like I know that it can sound crazy, but that's the situation here. And even if you go in a shop just buying your baguette, if you don't speak French, sometimes you can have a hard time. So it's good to have some basic communication elements when you arrive. But what I mean is that this is not necessary before entering the country. But once you're here, it can definitely facilitate a lot of things.
Yeah. Okay. That's good to know. I find that to be the case in a lot of countries. I've heard people complain about that in expats arriving to a new country and say, "Oh, I can't even get these applications in English," and it's like, well, you're not in an English speaking country. So if you can get that, I would consider it a bonus, but maybe not something to expect. And again, another reason just to like have a bilingual local that can help you navigate these waters. So we're going to focus in today, I think, on two different visas that you see the majority of your clients seeking. And you can correct me there if I'm wrong. If there's more, we'll get into more. But I had it in my mind we're going to get into these two that I'm very curious to learn more about. One, I'll tell you why I was eager to have this conversation with you. One is that there's an over with the explosion of remote work and digital nomadism becoming very popular, especially with a lot of things going on in other parts of the world. I know that your inbox has probably been filled up, as mine has, with questions about how to come stay in Europe longer. Europe's always been an attractive place to come to, and there's certain countries that are going to always attract a majority of the people who want to come spend time here. But with the dynamics that we're playing with in the world right now, I'm just seeing a lot more interest in this. And France happens to be one of those two or three or four countries that I see more often than not. And part of the reason for that, I say it's like part two to my comment here, is that I don't think France is as forthcoming with their desire to bring in those remote workers, digital nomads and such. I see, you see countries like Portugal that have kind of built like a whole brand around this, and France doesn't have, they have a very strong economy comparatively. They get a ton of tourism and visitors as it is. So for whatever reason, I haven't seen as much information out there about, hey, yeah, we want you to come spend a year here, come spend 5 years here, whatever. But I know that the opportunity does exist if you're willing to seek it out. So for those reasons, I'm very eager to dive into this with you.
Yeah, no, since I joined Lexidy, my law firm, all my colleagues from Portugal, from Spain, from Greece, from Italy were asking me, Ele, do you have a digital nomad visa in France? And all the time they are following up on me, like asking, so when is the digital nomad arriving in France? And I'm all the time replying, but there is no digital nomad visa. There are no plans to have this thing. Well, there are no talks in the government or anything about this, but we do have options. So in the facts, you can be a digital nomad in France. If the name is not the same, it's not branded like in Portugal or in Spain, but we have many options. And I can see that it's very, very attractive for remote workers, a lot of different kind of remote workers. We have people that work remotely, for instance, for foreign-based companies, or we have people that are freelancers or that wish to open a business in France. And all them, they manage to get their visa. So at the end, there is not such a big difference. Okay, we don't have the name digital nomad, but in the reality, we have a lot of good options for people that want to work from here.
That's so good to know. I think there's a lot of people breathing a sigh of relief when they when they hear that, because it's obviously a country that people want to spend time in, and I think maybe even for people that haven't been there, you have an idea. Maybe you think of Paris when you think of France, but like France has so much. When you talk about, it's one of the countries that has both the Alps and the Mediterranean Sea. It's got big cities like Paris, islands. Yeah, I mean, you have
Landscape
so
is so
much.
different. If you go to Normandy, you have these sandy beaches. You can go to Brittany where you have cliffs and you have the impression to be in Ireland. If you go to the south of France, like Menton, Nice, it's like being in Italy. You have Corsica. It's a country that has a lot to offer. As you mentioned, there are the mountains. Of course, a lot of people I meet via my job are like ski fans. They love doing ski instructors. I have a lot of them, and other people that just want to do surf in Avignon in the Atlantic Ocean. So yeah, it's a very various country. The landscapes are beautiful and so different. And I'm not talking about the food here because we could spend half an hour again speaking about cheese, wines, and no, it offers a lot of variety in terms of culture, landscape, sports, eating.
So someone who grew up in Italy, that says a lot, right? Because if you approve, then I think there must be some truth there. So yeah, I think France needs no selling in that regard. But I do, one of the things that once I started really traveling in France, that jumped out to me was it was just so much more than I expected, than I thought. I just had my initial impressions from visiting places like Paris, for example, but then like just getting deeper into the second, third, and fourth tier of the country, it just jumps out. It's really really impressive place. So obviously you and I agree on that. Let's get into some of the visa options. Where do you want to start first? I'll put it to you. What's
Well,
the
I'll start with our best-selling product, which is the visitor visa. Everyone wants it. Why? Because it's very easy to get. You have only three conditions to fill. I can sum them up as just having a medical insurance, enough savings to support yourself in France, and promise that you're not going to work in France. This is all, and this gives you access to a one-year visa that you can renew very easily directly in France, meaning that you don't have to go through to all the painful process of the consulate as well, which can be quite a journey in comparison. Renewing it here directly in France, it's really easy and smooth. And it's interesting as well because after 5 years, you could apply to 10-year residency card. You can stay longer. You can change your visa. So this is also something important that I always tell my clients because when you move to a country, sometimes you don't really know what you're going to do. Maybe you will work remotely for the beginning, and maybe then you want to have, like, I don't know, open an Airbnb. This is something that I have a lot, but people that don't know, they need to maybe buy a house, they don't know where they want to go, and they are stressed because they think, oh my God, I have to get this right from the very beginning. And this is where I say, no, relax. You just need to apply for an easy visa, and then you take your time, you think about it, you call me when you make up your mind, and we can change it. And this is a very good thing with the French immigration law, the visa system and residency permit system, is that you're not stuck with one visa or another. You can always change it, of course, following the rules and meeting the requirements of the one you're going to change for. But this is something important I would like to share with everyone.
Yeah, everybody should know about the visitor's visa, and I feel like almost nobody does. It's like so funny when I've talked with other digital nomads, like they kind of like skip over France because I mean that for all intents and purposes that's a digital nomad visa, right? Like you need income to support yourself from outside, or is it only savings?
It can be saving. But the easy thing is that it can be anything. It can be savings, it can be bank account statements, it can be income, it can be pension or rents or anything. I'm sometimes well, what I prefer, of course, is like having a banking account because it's easy for me. I can show the sum to the administration, but in reality, any type of income is accepted. I think that people maybe are don't really know about this visitor visa because of the non-working requirements, and this is a tricky point that is not really decided, meaning that we do not have a clear law stating that you can work remotely or not, because it's kind of an old rule, an old visa, and at that moment it was before COVID, and this was not something that they thought about while deciding this law. And unfortunately today they have other immigration problems they want to deal with before, I mean, the government. And so it's not a question that has been clearly settled. But what we do is that we contact the consulate and we ask. And I have very clear emails from the French consulates, especially in the US, because most of our clients that work remotely are for US based companies, and they accept to grant the visitor visa with a US working contract with US pay slips. So this is something that is accepted and that you can do, and they manage to renew their visa in France. Then, of course, what I advise you, but this is for another time, but I really advise you to contact a tax specialist to know a little bit your rights and what you should do, just to be aware of making things right. But in any case, you could, as long as, well, from our understanding and what we have seen, the position of the administration and the consulate is that as long as you do not have links with the French labor law market, it's okay to have the visitor visa, meaning no French employer, no French working contract, no French pay slips, or no French company, then the consulates do accept it.
Yeah, makes sense. That makes perfect sense. So if in that case, like just, let's do a fictitious example here. If I was coming from the US and I worked for a US company and they said, hey, yeah, you can go work remotely, or let's also incorporate. No, we'll save that. We'll save the second scenario for the second visa because I think we'll get into that. But let's say you work for a US company and I want to come work from France and I make enough money to sustain myself, then I could apply for this visa and come, and I would have 1 year before needing to renew it. More or less, that's correct.
It could be an option, but we have many different options. In this case, I could propose like three different things, and then we can choose together, of course. But there is also a possibility for the company to like register you as a remote worker from France, and this will enable you to have a working residency permit, which could be interesting because if you meet a certain threshold of salary, you can have a 5-year residency card right away. So what I want is always the best for my customers. So depending on your situation, I will advise you to apply for the visitor or other things because there are so many different options, a lot of
Interesting.
them.
Is there any benefit for the company in that case normally?
Benefit from the company, I would not say that, except from having a branch in France, maybe do some business in France. But of course, this implies paying French taxes, which can be not so interesting for a company.
Depending on where you're coming from, that could be a good or a bad thing. Uh, on the visitor's visa, are the remote workers, do they become French tax citizens, assuming they spend 6+ months there, or is that up
If
in the air also?
more than 6 months in France, yes, you're in theory you're a tax resident in France. You need to declare your taxes in France. This means not necessarily paying them, but in any case, yes, you're considered a tax resident. Then between the US and France, there are some agreements. We have agreements with different countries, bilateral agreements regarding taxes, and to avoid being paying taxes in both countries, of course. But in this case, it's recommended to have a clear picture before making the move, because of this is something important that we need to check beforehand.
Yeah. One of the cool things I love about working with Lexidy, like, aside from our discussions here, like I've worked with Lexidy to help me get visas and figure out tax stuff and all. It's just a very complex thing when you're suddenly working and living in two different countries, essentially. Like, you suddenly are working with two different tax entities and the two different governments, and you're dealing with immigration law and like there's a lot that you're having to deal with. So one of the reasons that I have enjoyed working with Lexidy is because I can do all of that in one place. So I
Exactly.
can legal stuff, immigration stuff, entity formation, blah, 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 and then also taxes. So that's a nice bonus.
Exactly. It's very important for us to be able to be there for our client at 360 degrees, and not them having to go to one professional and then another professional and then another one. It's all inclusive, and we are all colleagues, all working together, not only for one country but also between countries. Meaning that we sometimes have clients that don't really know, they want to move to Europe but they don't know where. Maybe Italy, maybe France, maybe Spain, and we can propose them like different options depending on their situation, and redirect them from one colleague to another. And it's also it builds a relationship with the clients, because then well, they know that they will be taken care of 100% by the same company, which
Yeah,
is
funny
definitely
enough, it's funny, like on a personal note, I can speak to that actually. I recently, I've got my long-term residency with Lexidy helping me get that in Spain, but I'm in Italy now for a couple months, just spending some time here, and been traveling around, spending some different time in different countries. And I just thought, like, I wonder what it would be like if I wanted to move to Italy. Like, I'm enjoying it here, just to know my options. And like, I got on the phone, had a 1 hour consultation with your colleague in
Giancarlo.
Italy. Yes, yeah, and he was fantastic. He helped me, walked me through everything. Like, here's what the process would be like, and here's the things you need to know. And anyway, it's just nice being able to do that. So anyway, very, very cool. Like, that connection definitely does build some like stickiness. Like, it's going to keep your clients around, which I think is a very nice thing, as opposed to just being focused on like one specific place or one specific topic. We'll be right back to the show after a quick break for a note from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by my friends over at Lexidy. I've lived abroad in various countries, and one common denominator I've found is that dealing with foreign bureaucracy is a nightmare. Trying to navigate visa and immigration waters in another language is not something I'd recommend ever trying on your own, even for the most experienced of us. So when I recently had to renew my Spanish visa again, I turned it over to the pros at Lexidy. They've already helped more than 5,000 expats and digital nomads find a home and thrive in countries like Portugal, or in my case, Spain, also Italy, France, and Greece. Some very desirable locations indeed. So whether you're trying to obtain your first visa abroad, purchase a property, or work through international tax issues, Lexidy's team of friendly lawyers is here to simplify your journey. The team is super knowledgeable, bilingual, and thorough, and I seriously cannot recommend their services enough. My experience working with them has been incredible, and I can honestly say I don't know that I would have EU permanent residency if it wasn't for the help of the team at Lexidy. So if you're ready to make your move abroad, then Lexidy is offering an exclusive discount to About Abroad listeners. Grab 10% off your first service with the code AboutAbroad2023 and learn more over at Lexidy.com in the show notes and start your abroad journey today. If you've made it this far into the episode and you're still enjoying yourself, then I would love to ask a quick favor. Open up the app that you're using to listen to this podcast and leave a quick review. You can do this in Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and really just about any platform that allows podcast listening now. If you can't find that in the interface of the app, then scroll down in the show notes and find ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, and you should be able to leave it from there. Thanks so much, guys. We really appreciate it and hope you enjoy the rest of the show. Let me come back to the visitor's visa real quick because there's a couple of questions I would have if I was thinking about getting this. This is one I know you get all the time, but what does it mean to financially be able to sustain yourself? Is there a number?
Yes, there is a number, which is the French minimum wage, which is today, well, it changes every year and even sometimes during the year, but it should be around 1,300 euros per month, more or less. What I usually advise is having at least 18,000 for a whole year. So it can be either installments or a lump sum, depending on the proof that you can show. Any type of asset is accepted. But yes, the reference is the French minimum wage.
Okay, perfect. So more or less, if doing some quick math for you said a lot of people are coming from the US. If you have 18,000 euros a year coming in, or around $20,000, then you would meet the minimum standard.
Yeah.
Going above and beyond that helps, I'm sure,
Yes.
but that's the minimum standard.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Okay, not too bad. And then you mentioned the medical certificate, so having medical insurance and showing that you're not sick, that you're not going to be a burden to the state is another.
Yes, you have to apply for a medical insurance that covers the duration of your stay. We can help with this point. We do it all the time, so we can propose you several options. And what I always tell, it's very important to know that, is that after your arrival in France, after the first 3 months, you can register in the French social security system, which apparently is one of the best in the world. I'm not an expert on that, but everyone says that it's a very good coverage. So this is definitely interesting. We have some clients that are maybe a bit older than us, and they are. This is definitely a plus for them. But so what I advise usually is to apply for the 1 year insurance to have the visa, but then something that you can cancel as soon as you enter in the French social security system. We can cancel the insurance and then and that's it. Mm-hmm.
So I would wonder actually on that. That's a good point. I don't know if your clients typically find this, but like as an American, I'm used to paying a lot of money for my health insurance, and we kind of separate Social Security from health insurance, I guess, like just naturally, because we think of Social Security more like our retirement pension, which we're not even sure if we're going to get. Like it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. Like I have to pay this percentage of my income every month, and I don't know what it's going to. I don't know how much I'm going to get, but that's its own thing. And then I'm also paying this exorbitant amount for my day-to-day health insurance that I may need, if I break my leg or get cancer or whatever. Like that's kind of like my emergency policy that will be there today. I also need to set a lot of money aside for for the quote unquote smaller expenses. So it's all to say that like health insurance is super expensive and sort of separate from the Social Security system. So my question, I guess, for you is like, do your, for example, American customers that come and move to France and buy that private health insurance policy at first and then decide to switch to the Social Security system, are they finding that to be like a plus, like a good part of moving to France, or is it like, oh wow, this is really expensive actually, and not a plus? I don't know if my
No,
question makes sense, but hopefully it does.
yes, it does. It does. No, no, no. It's definitely something positive for them, and sometimes it's also like the first question I get, like, is this visa allowing me to register in the French healthcare? And I say yes. No, no, this is definitely interesting. I don't know how much they are used to pay, but they are always very surprised with the rates they have to pay here. So yes, you have the social security, which is a very good coverage, and then you can have a complementary. But the amount that you pay, the monthly amount, is really reasonable. It's nothing to do with what you're used in other countries.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's good to know. I can say, like, from my standpoint, moving to Spain, like, my health insurance costs dropped by about 90%. So, like, I'm paying like 10 to 15% of what I was used to in the US. And I would say for like a better, like a more calming experience on top
Yeah,
of that.
I imagine.
Yeah. Okay, so visitors visa. I feel like we covered the major bullet points there. It seems extremely straightforward, which is like why it blows my mind that this isn't more well known. But maybe
Everyone
after
wants.
this episode, it will.
I don't know. I have like most of the clients that come to see me, they want this product. Yeah. Oh, no, it's very easy, straightforward, and then you have time to think about what you want to do, your plans next. So it's always a good thing. And you can travel not only in France, but you can travel in the Schengen area. Of course, being careful with the dates and the time that you're supposed to be outside or inside of France, but this is another topic. No, it gives you time, it gives you flexibility. It's easy, it's not expensive, and yeah, it's a very good way to enter Europe.
Okay, and so let me cover two last very like bureaucratic points here, just to make sure that people know what to do first and what their options are afterwards. So first of all, do you apply for this at in your home country's consulate, like back home in your home country, or once you get to
Yes,
France?
yes. Yeah, it's in the French consulate of your place of residency. So either nationality, either residency. And this is very important. I want everyone who is listening to us to remember that, because I have all the time people saying, oh, I am in France under the 90-day period, as a US citizen, British citizen, Australian, and other nationality, Canadians as well. They can enter Europe without a visa for 90 days. They enter and then they say, oh, I want to stay here, so what do I do? And it's complicated when you have to tell to an Australian person to go back home to make the application when they already settle in. So no, it's very, very important that people know that these things need to be done correctly before entering. We have to follow the procedures. It's a bit boring, but that's the way it works. So yeah.
Yeah, good to know. I think that's important. Don't arrive and then apply. Apply and then arrive. And then what about for renewal? You mentioned that at the end of the year you can renew it. You can renew this multiple times. So
Yes, directly in
you
France.
do that in France? Okay.
Yes, the rule is to like start the renewal process at least during the last 2 months before the expiration date of your visa. Now we have these online procedures. They are not all of them are not working very well yet, but I think the government is working on that. And yeah, you make the renewal, then you have an appointment in person at the administration here, where you submit your documents, and so at the end of this year, they will give you a physical residency card. Because the visa is just a stamp on your passport. So don't worry. All the time, clients complain like, "Oh, I want a residency card," and I tell them that the long stay visa, for instance, the visitor, which is a 1 year, so a long stay visa, has the same legal validity of a physical card. So don't stress out if you don't have it the first year. It's perfectly normal.
Awesome. Very good to know. And on that note, for the initial application process, roughly how long do you recommend people give themselves to complete this? I mean, it seems so straightforward, but sometimes these things can be super slow.
Yeah, we can have everything settled in 1 month, but of course it depends on the reactivity of the person that we have in front. Like sometimes they struggle to gather the documents, or they don't really understand what type of insurance they need to buy. And then, of course, we have the consulates part, which can be quite a journey. The French consulates hired these private companies in the US and in the UK. It's the case in Canada as well. And in Australia, in different countries that handle the first stage of the visa application, meaning the place where you book an appointment, where you submit your file. And sometimes the services are not up to standards. I would say it's complicated to put a hold on them, to just book an appointment. For instance, during the high seasons in the summer or now during the Christmas time, sometimes it can be more complicated to book an appointment. And this does not depend on the applicant or on us, it's just the administration's availability. So this is something to take into account regarding the timing, just to know that in certain periods of the year, it will take more time.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And I think is good to know. And then my last question on the visitor's visa is, you mentioned the ability to pivot to, when you just don't know what you're going to do, but that implies that you, once you get into the country and you've been there for a little bit, you may decide your life may change, and it can open up doors for different opportunities. So is that correct to say? And what do you see people using it for?
So I see a lot of people that switch to visitor to entrepreneur, which is like for freelancer, because they want to open a business or work for themselves. Basically, there are people that are offered a job position, and in this case, we switch to employee. Or there are people that fall in love with a French person or a European person, and you can get a spouse of EU citizen, spouse of French residency permit. A lot of things can happen in a year after all. So yes, there are many options depending on your situation.
Okay. All right. So that's good to know. You're not just locked into this one situation, and in fact, it could be your foot in the door to perhaps be there and then get hired locally, or meet the person of your dreams. Um, so okay, good to know. And then you just mentioned the freelancer visa, and I don't know if that's different from the entrepreneur visa, but this was the other one we were going to get into, so maybe it's a good segue into that option.
Yes. So what can I tell you about this? So this is meant for freelancers. So any type of activity that you do for yourself without an employer or a company that hires you. To get this visa, the main thing is to prepare a business plan, explaining what you will do, what kind of clients you think you will have, how much you think you will invoice in France. It does not need to be accurate, but it's just a project. Like, if I get the visa, this is my plan. So sometimes I have people that are anxious, saying, but I never did it before. I don't have a running business in my home country. And this is where I say, no, it's not a problem. Relax. It's just a project. So if you give me the visa, this is what we are going to do. You get your visa, then you enter France, and then you start opening your business. There is nothing you have to do on a company point of view, like setting up an entity or anything before arriving. And this is something that I want to underline, because it can give a lot of anxiety to people. But it's important to know that it's not necessary. And so we submit this project to a French administration that gives an opinion on it. And when we have this opinion, then we apply for the visa in itself, which is as well a 1-year visa. Once you enter France, then you are able to register your company, set up the entity, do all the administration things that you have to do, and renew it as well on a yearly basis. So this is more for the I call them normal entrepreneur, which is the 1 year. But there is also another option for people that want to set up a business, which is a talent passport for entrepreneur. It's a premium visa, if I can say, because you can travel with your family. You can have a residency permit up to 4 years, depending on your project. But this is supposed to invest at least 30K in your project in France. So this is the main difference.
Interesting. So in both of these cases, are you seeing people set up sort of more like brick and mortar businesses? Like they're going to have a actual physical presence there and try to get French clients, or are they also people working online, running digital businesses?
It depends. I have both.
Okay.
It's I have really a lot of different persons that use this visa. Also, people that were formerly employed by companies, but then decide to work for the same company, but as a consultant. So they are invoicing them. Their status changes a little bit. I have writers. I have professors, photographers. I had someone that was making jewels. And then people that want to open a restaurant or Airbnbs, a lot. Yeah, it can be anything, but working for yourself.
Okay. And so for the person who does work online, let's say like a freelancer that just does a lot of a graphic designer, for example, or a writer or something, like all their work could be done online. Maybe they work for themselves. They have their own entity. I know a ton of these people, right? Like it sounds like in theory they could do the visitor's visa or this entrepreneur visa. Is that correct? Or why would someone choose one over the other?
It's a bit tricky because when you apply for the entrepreneur, you register your company in France. You have a French entity, you invoice your clients from France. Um, and that's what you're supposed to do in theory. If you're working as a freelancer in France, you're supposed to declare it and register yourself. Mhm.
Okay. All right. So if I work if I'm self-employed, I run my own consulting business or graphic design business or something like that, and I'm working for multiple clients. I think this is how a lot of governments distinguish between a freelancer and like a remote worker in a lot of cases, because they're sometimes technically employed similarly, but if you're working predominantly for one company versus working for multiple clients or companies, then that would kind of be a distinguishing factor.
Mhm. Yes, we can say that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Good to know. And with this, so how do you call this visa? Is it the entrepreneur visa? Is it the freelancer visa? Is it interchangeable terms?
Yeah, in reality, well, the French law says entrepreneur profession libérale, liberal profession. Yeah, but I find this very confusing, so I just call them freelancer visa or the normal entrepreneur visa and the talent passport one. So you get the difference between the two.
Very good. Okay. And similar kind of like framework of questions here, just from like a bureaucratic standpoint, as we mentioned for the visitor's visa. How long would you recommend someone take to apply for this? Do they do it in their home country? When do they renew it? And what does that process look
Mhm.
like?
So same process you apply for from your own country, and this is for all the long stay visas. It's very important to apply for from your country of residency. Then it's also for 1 year. Let's say the basic one is for 1 year. In terms of renewal, it's the same. You have to start the renewal process at least the 2 months before the expiration date of your long stay visa. Then you get a physical card, same story. What you need to show after 1 year is that your business is viable, that you're earning money out of it. We are not asking that you're earning millions, but at least to show that you can sustain yourself with your activity and that you're registered, that you declared your taxes. All this is important paperwork to keep in mind. And yeah, as well, you register in the social security. What else can I say? I think, yeah, it's oh yeah, the timing you asked. It takes a little bit more time to prepare this than the visitor, but I would say maybe 2 3 months would be fine. Of course, depending on how fast you can prepare the business plan, etc. But I mean, this is something that we can help with. We do it all the time, and once again, it does not need to be accurate. I meet many persons that are just so worried about the business plan. People that don't really like, that are not business people, and that are a bit scared about this. I would be personally if I didn't know how simple it is in reality.
It
It does
sounds
not.
intimidating, but it's not.
The word is intimidate, but no, it does not need to be accurate. You can just draft something very simple, very easy. What I always say is like it's a detailed CV, explaining who you are, what you do, what your plan is, introducing yourself, and then of course after you arrive in the country, then you show what you're capable of. But beforehand, there's nothing to worry about.
That's very comforting, I think, for anybody who feels intimidated by the idea of creating a business plan that their visa and residency status is going to hinge on. I think I think you've done a good job making us feel more comfortable with that. So thank you. And so the last question I want to ask is, in general, I've in other countries, and it sounds like from some comments that you've made during this discussion that at or around the 5-year mark of renewing these visas that are they're long term, quote unquote, but they're by some standards they're sort of like more like medium term. They're 1 year, 2 year, and then you
Yes.
get to this 5-year mark where now you've built a life for yourself in this country. And often you have to transition to something else at that point. So is that the case in France? And do these visas that we've covered today kind of give you that opportunity to extend your time indefinitely in France if you choose to?
Yes, 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 definitely. So depending on the residency you have or the visa you have, you can jump from 1 year to 2 years or 3 or 4. But yes, the threshold of the 5 years is important because there are two things that you need to know about the 5 years of residency in France. Not only you can apply for a 10-year residency card, but you could also apply for French citizenship, meaning that you have to show that you're integrated in France. Of course, if you apply for citizenship, you need to speak French, know French culture, be economically able to sustain yourself, show that you have strong ties with France. So this is for the naturalization process. Regarding the 10-year card, it's more or less the same, but of course with less heavy conditions. You need to show that you have been living for 5 continuous years in France, that you're declaring your taxes in France, that you speak French, things like that. But it's not complicated to get it as long as you fulfill the requirements. It's definitely something worth asking for.
Okay. Good to know. Yeah, your time's not up after 5 years, and you have to return home and miss your old life in France. They welcome you, so that's that's really good to know. I know I've got to let you go here in just a minute. So I first want to say thank you for sharing all the information. It's super helpful. It's a very popular place that people want to go to. So I know this will be helpful for those out there that are curious and hoping to make a life in France, whether that be for a year, 5 years, or more. I think this is really useful. Do you feel like we missed anything? Are there any other like points that you want to make sure people know about, or did we cover most things already?
Oh, maybe I can mention very quickly, don't forget about your driving license. Meaning that during your first year of stay in France, it's important to change your foreign driving license to a French one, because if you let go the first year, then you cannot do it, and you have to pass the French exam, which can be really really painful, the theory, the practice, etc. And trust me, it's something important to keep in mind, and it will make you save a lot of money as well.
I can tell you a funny story about that really quickly. So there's like a running joke in Spain amongst the expats and people that have been living there, for foreigners living there for a while, that there's this rule that after 6 months of living in Spain you have to get a Spanish driver's license. And even Spanish people will tell you the whole process to get a driver's license in Spain is incredibly cumbersome and super expensive, especially by like local standards. It's just like a whole thing that a lot of people think is kind of, even like locals think it's crazy that they've created this process and the expenses associated with it and everything. Anyway, but everybody says, yeah, but you have an international license, you're never going to get a ticket for that. It's never going to be an issue. Just basically nobody follows that rule. Well, anyway, I was the lucky one that did get a ticket for that. And I got pulled over for something else. And then they checked my license, and then they said, "Oh, you've been living here longer than 6 months. You have to get a Spanish driver's license," and slapped me with a big fine. And anyway, so I went down that road of getting a Spanish driver's license. And as you just alluded to, it is a pain to do in a foreign country. So if you have any way, in Spain, they don't have this offering. Like you have to go get the local, you have to go through this process no matter what. In France, it sounds like you could avoid that process if you just do the process of exchanging, basically.
It depends where your driving license has been issued. And for instance, within the American states, it depends on the states where you're coming from. Them you can exchange it, some of them no. And it's very important to know it in advance and take the time to do the paperwork. We will be more than happy to help, of course. But it's something that I really want the people that are listening to us to remember and take into account.
Good to know. Yeah, going back to driving school with a bunch of 15-year-olds and 16-year-olds when you're 35 is not fun. So I recommend you do that if you can. This was so good. Yeah, thank you for all the information. And again, a big thanks to Lexidy for all the work that you all do in this space. We'll put the links to your website and everything in the show notes, so people can follow up with you there if they have more detailed questions. But yeah, thank you again. This was fantastic.
Thank you, Chase, for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit of my working experience as well as my personal path. And no, I'm really looking forward to hearing your next podcast. And if ever you wish to come to France, don't hesitate to reach out.
I will definitely do that. Yeah, thank you so much. It's a place I look forward to spending even more time in. And now I have a friend in Paris, so that's exciting. Thanks again. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in today from wherever you are in the world. Once again, I'm Chase, and this has been another episode of About Abroad. For those of you wondering how you can best support the show, I have made it super simple for you. Just go over to the show notes of the episode that you just finished listening to and click on one of the two following links. aboutabroad.com/newsletter to get our monthly newsletter, no spam, guaranteed, or ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, where you can quickly and easily leave a review for the show. It's not just important to me, it also helps more wanderers just like you find us. Finally, don't forget to subscribe on your podcast platform of choice, and we will see you again next week. Thanks again. Hasta luego, amigos.